Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Arshad Hisham, who's the founder of inGen. Arshad is a founder in hardware automation and enterprise software startups in the past. Arshad is an alumni of Cranfield 2008 batch, and a big thanks to Aditya Chebi for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Arshad.
Thank you, Rohit. Look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So, one point of contact was obviously Aditya, but as some of the listeners know, I went to UK, did my masters from Cranfield. You've been a Cranfield MBA, but how did you get your start in startups, and how did the entire journey start for you?
Sure, I think it's a great question. When I went to do my MBA, pretty much in 2008, I went for an MBA like any typical professional would do to get a 40% hike in pay, right? So this
Right.
is kind of a reason I went in, and in fact, I was a career rep for my cohort. So I was
Right.
selected as a task rep for careers. And but what the MBA did, there is an excellent course called Organizational and Personal Development, right? We call it OBPPD, right? Which is
Yeah.
fantastic. So that had a lot of inward-looking tools which helped me understand what I like, what I don't want, what are my strengths, what are my weakness, and I think that played a lot of part. And 2008, as you know, Lehman Brothers went bust. So
Yeah.
it was a pretty bad job market. So I thought, why don't I give a shot at starting a firm? And I could always come back and join the job market when it's healthier. So that's how I started. But I always had the bug in me to start. I was and still am a very big science fiction fan. So a lot of things that very early on I started reading Asimov when I was 11, right?
Mm.
I remember that, And one of the things I wanted to do early on is to bring or create a lot of this fascinating futuristic products that I read in the books, right? So,
Nice.
and I want to do that. And that's, so I was always been a creator at heart. And, I think 2008, when I started building my first startup, I kind of got into the journey, and it just took off from there, pretty much.
Interesting. Very interesting. And um, you know, we had a discussion earlier where you said, and I found it very intriguing. You had a MBA admit from Oxford and Cranfield. Um, somebody who's listening to this podcast, how should they get to decide what MBA should they take up? Especially, somebody who's an international student, could be from UK or US. If they've never been to the country, or they would have been there, but they would want to know which B school to go to. How did you get to decide, you would go and take up Cranfield?
Yeah, so I did apply for a lot of schools, by the way. I had a pretty decent GMAT score, and I did apply for some schools in the US, some in Asia Pacific and some in the UK. And I think at that stage of uh, my career, I mean, I had 8 years experience, probably
Right.
in program management and, in diverse roles. I started out as a engineer at IBM Software Labs and all the way to operations management, program management before my MBA. So I
Right.
wanted to learn a lot from my cohort. So the cohort experience was very important. And I didn't want to go for a very quant intensive course. I mean, a lot of the US MBAs are very quant intensive and pretty much. So this is a very different learning. And in fact, I would even now say that a lot of my learning has been from my cohort, from the
Right.
different people who came in. Like I had a gentleman who worked in DBS. I had somebody from Johnson Johnson. I had somebody from World Bank, all my case study team, and the perspectives they brought on each of the case studies were good. So I think that was my criteria. And I always felt, I mean, obviously there were other highly reputed ranked colleges, but I even before the MBA, I had this clear conviction that the MBA is just an icing on the cake. You are the cake. So
Yeah.
the brand can take you further along. But I mean,
Right.
if you don't build your profile. So from that perspective, I think you need to look at what you really want from an MBA. And it's okay if you don't know that. I mean, that's probably one good thing with an MBA is that once you do that, a lot of people realize what you want to do with their career. right?
Nice.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot of people don't understand that when you're coming in. So that's also fine. But I think you should be clear, right? What do you expect from the cohort? What do you expect from the school? What do you expect from in terms of career growth? Do you have a financial commitment? Are you getting sponsored? So there's a lot of variables, right? I've been very happy with my decision. I think it's been one of the great years of my life. And I think, I still look back fondly to my Cranfield MBA 15 years back, 16 years back. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting that, you've always been giving back uh, to the B school and to the community. And very interestingly, the executive team is also built from, some of your batchmates of Cranfield, and it's very remote based. Something remote happened in the last couple of years. But how did you build up your executive team from the people you knew and from Cranfield?
Yeah, so I think we did actually. So when I started my journey in 2017, 18, it was we were a fledgling startup. We were trying to figure out which direction to go, which even now we are still trying to
Yeah.
figure out, to be honest. There are still, compasses. But I think the journey was interesting. There was a lot of press coverage we got, fortunately, and a lot of my batchmates and peers from Cranfield, got interested, came to know what I was doing, started following me for like 2-3 years. And I had a relationship with them, and they kind of came on board, as some of them started in as advisors, and then I think some of them became consultants, and some of them became full-time employees with us. So it's been like an interesting journey, and some of them have also invested
Nice.
in the company. So I think there is a multi-pronged thing, and I think it's a very natural thing to do, because you kind of know the people you're recruiting. It's not an unknown entity compared to, especially when you're recruiting at an executive level, right? This is very
Right.
key. The fit is very important. So you kind of know that. And there is kind of a period where they were kind of an advisor / consultant. And this is a pattern I followed for 6 months. So we could figure out what is a fit, what are our hot buttons, so to say, right? And then make the jump headlong, right? So this is how it has been. And I think for everybody who has joined, I think nobody has regretted it, but definitely they had much more peaceful lives before. A lot of them, right? Given the speed, but definitely everybody has enjoyed every month. They have said that the exposure we've given in terms of fundraising, targeted sales, addressing issues, growing teams. I think it's been fascinating journey. And I've also been fortunate to be kind of, be in that situation for the last 5 years. So that's how we ended up having a lot of people in Cranfield.
Got it. Interesting. And it's said that the first company you build it for your investors, second company you build it for your co-founders or whatever. But the third company, I mean, if you're up to it, then you build it for yourself. Now you want your fifth startup, which is quite interesting. What keeps you going? Because once you have your couple of exits, you either want to become like a VC or give like a gyan or start like a podcast. But you want to keep building, So what's your why, and what keeps you going?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I'm just gonna go see, as I said, Rohit, I'm kind of a contrarian entrepreneur, right? I have a lot of things, and I think in life also I have some contrarian concepts. So I think
Nice.
one of that is that what I would like to point out is that the 5 startups was not a linear progression of success. You know what I mean, right? This is not now just kept on succeeding. So I think there were like couple of startups where we struggled a lot, and we had a lot of issues. Those were like startups where we learned, and with every startup, the fun thing with entrepreneurship is that how many things you do, every new company with new variables is an unknown, right? You can't say that you're prepared for that fifth setup, so you always have that accelerating phase, and the journey that comes with a new startup. So this is always there. And for me, like, I've been fascinated by AI automation robotics very early on, right? I had a couple of research papers in 98 when I studied at REC, now it's called an NIT,
Yeah.
right? And I had a research paper on coherent backpropagation network. It is actually the very, very old predecessor of the AI models that's in the market now. So I think we published, and it was fascinating. I was kind of driven by how they modeled it, and we created a robots that play soccer. It's called Soccer Robots, and we did championships in Korea.
Wow.
And so I think it was fascinating. And I remember in '98, image processing was like the bulky cameras, and you had the massive PCs. And so now when I went through all the companies, I was seeing the world getting, the microprocessors getting cheaper, faster, vision getting better. So all the things I wanted to do early on kind of came at a crux in 2015 that, there are two things. One is that I gained a lot of experience as an entrepreneur,
Right.
as a professional. So I was ready to take this headlong. And I think the industry became ready for some of the products I want to create, and also ready in the sense not to create it. That was always there, but is a commercial environment ready to accept the products, right? So that started changing in 2015. And that's when I decided that I'll take a plunge. And I'm a full-in entrepreneur. I proudly say that I'm fully in on my company. I don't have an investment portfolio. I'm fully in, all in on the company, right? So that's how serious I am, and that shows how much skin I have in the game.
Right. So super interesting. And from what I understand is like you don't have a like VC investing into your startup, and you don't correct me if I'm wrong if you don't have a board, but was it a conscious decision not to take funding from outside? What led to that thesis?
Yeah. So again, going back to my contrarian theme, here, Rohit, I think again, so you'll see a lot with me. So I think there is a lot of concepts that people don't understand, and especially, I would say if you can, and there's a nice graph that I shared on LinkedIn, I think a month back, which shows a bootstrapped entrepreneur versus a funder entrepreneurs, and there's a graph with stress on the left side, on the y-axis, and time on the x-axis, right?
Yeah.
So on the VC funded entrepreneur, it remains constant.
Yeah.
Right. But for the bootstrap entrepreneur, the stress is double the VC entrepreneur in the beginning, but it falls down to 1/10 of the VC as time progresses. Right. And that's a very nice way of putting it, right? Because the VC objectives are different. They want a 10x, and which is fine. They want a 10x or a large multiplier on the returns. They're going to push you for growth. They won't be happy with the 15% growth because that doesn't give returns on their funds. So it's a matter of what you want. So there is no right or wrong. So if you want that kind of growth, that's a company you want to build, then you can take VC money on that terms. And again, it'll be kind of what to classify every VC deal as same. So I think I would say the VC terms. So it depends on your VC terms. You should kind of align with what you want to do with your company, because once you're lined up with it, there's no going back. Right. If there is a liquidation preference, if you give away operational control, you can't take it back. Okay. So then in a couple of years, in a year, you can't say that the VC cheated you, or he's not your friend. He's not your friend. He's an investor. He's returned to give capital return to his fund. So I think, so that understanding is very important. And I think there are different ways of growing. So what I've raised money from investors. I've raised money from VCs in the past. And in my current company, I do have investors, but my terms are very founder friendly, probably because of my so many startups that I've started, number one. And second is that the class structure, there are 4 classes of share: class A, class B, class C, and class D, right? And I give my investors class B. I have class A shares, which has 200 votes. And what this does is that even if I raise capital and dilute the shares, I still have control because my class A shares has super voting rights. So this way I've consciously created it because what I'm building is extraordinary. is a journey that will be riddled with a lot of potholes and obstacles, right? And I think, I want to be sure that the VC or investor doesn't kind of, derail the boat. So I've taken only those investors who align with it. So that's why I would phrase it. I've taken money from investors, but they are aligned with the long-term vision. I have a lot of retail investors, some very high-profile investors. We had investors from managing partners in global firms, from Google, to give an example, and from throughout the spectrum worldwide, right? So that's what I would advise. And I think, and I also disagree with all the celebration that you do when you raise money. So when you raise money, you're signing up for commitments. I would be scared. When you open a bottle of champagne when you raise $5 million, because now you need to kind of give a return for that money, what valuation you've taken. So you celebrate when you hit a good run rate, when you get a good sales target, you get acquired. So I think that's why I think the magazines and the tech magazines have glamorized raising money, and it's a badge of honor. But there are great companies. A classic example is Zoho, right? I mean, was not raised money, but what a fantastic company has built, right? And so that's what I would say. There is no right or wrong answer, but you need to really understand what you're getting into, is what I would say. And I've taken this conscious decision because I want control. I'm not looking to be wealthy. I want the creative freedom, and I want to be able to steer the ship when the water becomes turbulence on my terms, right?
Right.
Not on the investor's return. And I want only those investors who are aligned with it on the journey, right? Because, and again, a very nice way of putting it, I think in Kung Fu Panda, you see the movie, there is a nice thing, when Bear asks, what's more important, the journey or the destination? And, and the reply is that it's neither, it's a company. Right. So that's again very important here. Like, who you bring on your journey is critical.
Correct. So, interesting. And Arshad, I was wondering, what's the inGen's thesis or main goal? You're not looking for consumer retailers like what Optimus would be looking at, but what's the main goal for you?
We're looking at building out a platform which a lot of companies can use. And our goal is to improve quality of life for humans. This is in one sentence.
Right.
And by using affordable, intuitive, and practical AI automation robotics. This is very precise definition of our main theme and everything, right? So we need products that are intuitive, practical, and affordable. AI automation robotics, and it should improve the quality of human life. So everything is derived from these points, the whole company.
Correct. Interesting. And how are you looking to, mitigate any potential risk factors with the robots, especially when it comes to, B2B environment?
Sure. I think this is a very risky business, not only from a physical risk, from a business standpoint as well. This is a high risk business, right? For any investor coming in. So one thing I've done consciously is that have a lot of cash flow options on the ground, which can generate money through services, training. So we have launched into a great educational initiative called Future Knots, which has got a lot of legs, which is generating cash. We have less complex products coming out on the ground, which is doing it. And in terms of the industrial risk, the physical risk, I think we have a lot of industrial design concepts going into the product. And industrial design involves things like ergonomics, which is like make it safe. Like, you should not kind of, get your hand or arms entangled in it, right? Is it the radius? Okay. So I think there are a lot of things that goes into industrial design. This is a very different thing. So we have done a lot of that, but I think it's a growing field, and I think it'll be an exciting ride. It won't be easy, but it'll be exciting.
Correct. And when you initiate, a work with a company, what's like the projected deployment timeline for your robots to start working and executing?
So usually the tabletops are like the one that we are actively pushing and pursuing, right? This is like a non-mobile unit. So this can get deployed in 3 months to 6 months.
I
right?
see.
This is what you're looking at. And I think if you see the mobile units, this can be deployed from a slightly longer time frame. We need to look at the environment. We need to look at the mapping. So this can be deployed for anywhere between 6 to 12 months, right? This is what you're looking at for the mobile units. And if you look at the software products, obviously it's a month to get it up and running, right?
Oh,
Because
okay.
it's much easier. So this is kind of a spectrum of what you're doing. And we obviously have a lot of SDK enabled units, which we're giving to the universities and colleges. We are setting up center of excellence with several universities as we speak this month. And we're giving a lot of SDK enabled robots. We're also getting into a lot of schools. So we have, so we are trying to do a lot of awareness. So even the kids going in preschool know about robots, right? So
Nice.
they have some classes. So I think we have a lot of that going in. So I think, yeah, so we have different deployment based on what it is, what does the customer needs, and does he need an off the shelf or does he need a bit of a customization? So there's a range that you're looking at.
Got it. Interesting. And the times are so different. Like if you look at some of the job titles, product manager, we didn't have those sort of job roles, or like a partnerships manager in the last 10, 20 years. And very interestingly, you pointed out about sharing, the products in schools and colleges. What uh, skills would somebody who comes out of college would need in order to upskill themselves, and to learn more about AI and robotics, because I think that's going to be like the next wave of new
Sure.
jobs that are going to open there.
Sure. So the way I would define it, and I think it's a very interesting point, I would say around 95% of the job in the next 5 to 10 years
Yeah.
would contain at least 70 to 80% of AI automation robotics. So that's a correct way of phrasing it. Rather than saying new jobs will come or, I think the jobs will remain, but around 95% would, and in those 95%, at least 70% would contain an element of AI automation robotics.
Nice.
So this will become like a new skill and a tool that using like the computers in the 80s, the Excel, you need to now know AI automation robotics. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have a job. You're going to have a job, but it will be a very different job. You're going to have a new computer. You're going to have an AI. You're going to have an automation workflow. You're going to have robots to do that. And your productivity will be like 20x, 50x what you're doing now. And there will be disruption. So the current work environment, and I'm not talking tech, I'm talking about accounts, legal, business development, sales. You're already seeing it with AI in what you're doing, right? So I think everywhere it will be there. And the people who don't understand that this bus is coming, they'll be caught unawares, right? So there'll be a lot of job displacement, is the right phrase to use. And you need to either retrain, or you'll have new set of people who are ready to accept the change and move on, because you can't compete with a 50x boost in productivity. No matter how good you are. So you would need to use all this in whatever you're doing. Even if you're a nurse or a dentist, you need to have the skills in the next 5 to 15 years.
Correct.
So that will be my strong message coming out of this podcast to everybody.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because, a lot of people are scared because, we all thought AI would first displace, jobs which are done like with physical labor. But what we've seen is it's like the creative people, who are getting displaced, or, that's really disrupting it. And when it comes to, job titles or jobs, new jobs which are going to come out from these new industries, do you think about any job titles which you could think of could happen in the next 2 to 5 years?
I can think of one that's going to explode is an AI ethics and compliance manager.
Nice.
That's going to explode, right?
Wow.
And that's a huge thing, right? Nobody's prepared. Every company, every domain would need one. And the job is to make sure that the compliance is there. For example, the GDPR, local rules, right? And that is going to be a very specialized role, which incidentally only a human can do.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
You can't give it to an AI. And I also think that, see, even in the case of artists, I think AI is not necessarily replacing. I think it's just a tool. So I think it's like the Maslow's hierarchy. You move up in terms of what you're comfortable. Similarly, in terms of job, people will move up. So you are freed up to do very creative things. You may use a lot of these AI tools to create different scripts, different videos, and then you will combine and mix. So you'll kind of become more faster, but you can't have a 6 month wait time. You're
Yeah,
going to churn this out in a week, couple of weeks, come with iteration. But I think that's what I'm saying. So I think the role is not going to go away. The role is going to look so different
true.
that you won't even realize that's the same role,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah. Interesting. And also, couple of months back, we had quite a lot of drama at OpenAI because the safety team felt like OpenAI could be dangerous. And what are your thoughts on companies like Google and Microsoft, which had such huge distribution channels, and uh, I feel with AI, it could be incumbents or big companies who could have that edge over startups because of the distribution channels. But how do you see, big companies looking at safety and ethics and, governing the whole AI thing?
I think there is definitely a very big risk.
Yeah,
Okay. And
true.
I'll tell you why. And it's not from a Terminator movie perspective, right?
True.
I'll give an example. It's from a very classic example is something called the paperclip maximizer. Let's
Right.
say you create an AI that can maximize number of paper clips in the world. You forget to optimize a parameter. You let it run in the world, and it actually takes over the whole earth and makes it a paperclip machine. Goes to the moon, and it destroys all humans, plants, animals, everything along the way.
Right.
See that's a doomsday scenario, but not in the way you would think. Not like some robot with a gun going out and killing people. So this scenario is very scary, and this could happen. And the probability says that if you're gonna get into so many different variations, something's gonna are gonna slip through the cracks. I
Hmm.
mean, you can't avoid it, and I think you can't control it also, right? I mean, we can't. I mean, now the cat is out of the bag, literally, right? You can't control it now,
Yeah.
right? It's gonna happen, right? So I think the best thing to do is to kind of mitigate it as we build, make sure there are measures, and I think the world is doing that. And I think even the Chat GPT, I don't know if you saw the 4.0 demo,
Yeah.
it blew me away. It
True.
blew me away. My goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, so what's going to do in 1 or 2 years? It's just unthinkable, right? So I think we definitely need. It's a lot of thinking around the space. It's very exciting, and I think as humans, we are in a period of time in our evolution which is unprecedented.
Yeah.
This is very new for us as a species, right?
Yeah.
This is not something to be taken lightly. So yes, I think there should be more thoughts around all this coming in.
Right. Right. Interesting. You said about the new update because whenever Google comes up with an update a day before or a week before, OpenAI wants to. So it's a very interesting way in which both the companies are trying to fight it out. And I always thought like nobody can take over Google search, and now they could be in a serious threat in the next couple of years. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Um, yeah, and when it comes to partnerships, what sort of corporate partnerships have you established to accelerate your growth across the world?
I think we have different partners locally, globally, internationally. I think we have different partners. And again, you need to understand we are a very forward-looking company, right? A lot of our value, described value in our company's valuation based on future revenues. Yet, so we are kind of forward-looking, like all the recent AI automation robotics company. So it's very important to have the right partners and the right products. And again, if I just shared one old talk from Naval Ravikant from
Yeah,
2014, which is very nice, where he said that the future will be all startups because of the way things are moving. And this will be like, and again, going back to what Sam Altman said, there'll be 5% billion-dollar companies, right?
yeah,
So going back to, and you can build it with 5 to 10 people, not hundreds and thousands like Google and Facebook. That time is over. So
yeah,
looking into that, we need to be smart with the way this is distributed. We don't necessarily need to scale. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of time. So we need to think all this from a new perspective. So this is a scary part, Rohit, right? Everything is changing. Sales, partnership, distribution. And you just don't know, I know how to kind of hit the right notes this time
yeah,
around. So every CEO I'm talking to is apprehensive, right?
yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I recently read a note about how $100 million SaaS company in India is scared that AI is going to disrupt them. So So that worry and anxiety is obviously there, but it's exciting at the same time. Like what you mentioned, you'll have a 5 people unicorns where they won't need money to scale up. So I don't know. I haven't seen that world, but it's going to be exciting when that's going to happen in the next couple of years. And especially, since you're a serial entrepreneur, you've done it multiple times. How do you approach team building and the size of the team over the years, over the last couple of companies that you built?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in a core team of 10, like what Steve Jobs did in Apple. There is a core team of 10, which is always great in execution
Nice.
as you grow, and the key decision making should happen. It grows more than that. There's a lot of noise, a lot of inefficiencies, right? So I think if you can keep the decision making between a team of 10, no matter your size, you're probably okay, right? And I think if it grows beyond that, it becomes difficult. The second thing is that, again, this is going back to what Elon Musk says a lot, is hire for attitude, not for skills, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of very important. I think skills are, I mean, you're doing some very tough things in a limited time with a very limited money, right? If the people around you don't have the right attitude, it's not going to work out well.
Yeah.
Right, because they're going to get seriously pissed a lot of times along the journey, and they'll just drop out, sulk, not. So the attitude is very important, more so in a fast-growing startup than a corporate company. The corporate companies are designed to incorporate and cultivate people of different gravitas.
Yeah.
A growing startup doesn't have that luxury. So I think hiring for attitude is very high up, and skills are less important. And 3 is that I think you need to understand that, it's unfair to expect every employee to have the same passion and the same risk appetite as a founder.
True.
They're not founders. They have a different, and this is something every founder should realize, that nobody's going to drink your Kool-Aid. Your upside is different, your vision is different. So you need to align incentives for each people. If they can do 2-3 years in your startup, and if they can move on, get a good career, you can actually attract a lot of good people for 2-3 years, which is fine.
True.
Right. So you need to understand what you're offering people. And we had around 200-300 alumni, and 4 of them have become entrepreneurs. Right.
Nice.
So this is kind of interesting. A lot of them gone for higher studies. Some of them didn't part in good terms. I think they were burned out and all that, but now they've called me up and said they thank for the experience. So I think a lot of people realize 5 years after they left us how good the experience was, right?
Yeah.
And when they go into other companies. So I think we had a good run, but I would say that we are more like a boot camp, and we prepare you for really hard R&D and really hard innovation work. So this is kind of what we do with a lot of people, and this is our recruiting tool also. I think
Right. Interesting. And Arshad, when you're looking to hire somebody, you're spending anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, or maybe in a couple of rounds you're spending not more than 3 hours. How do you judge for curiosity, the passion, and then attitude in a hire, especially since you're spending so little time with them?
Yeah. So what I generally tend to do is that, I'll tell you one thing. I've literally hired 80% of my hires are inbound requests, right? So these are people who have been following us, wants to come. And it's the same with my investors and my hires. And it's actually good for us because you can negotiate better terms.
True.
They're already sold on your story.
Yeah.
Both from investors, from employees, so you can do that. So I think the thing is that we have a good PR mechanism. We have good social media channels. We have good stories and good blogs. And I speak. I'm speaking at a couple of events this month. So I try to go out and so then we kind of attract people and we try to convert. So to answer your question, it's only around 20-25% is converted from an outreach. The other 80% is already sold. They already know the vision, and then they come in. We need to do less of a negotiation, right? And and there's a guy who I literally took. He wanted to be with us for like 2 years, and I kind of jumped the gun after 2 years and took him on board. But I think he was very happy, and that's another thing. You don't want to push people in. So I think, and it's the same for investors. So most of my best investment terms are from investors who kind of reach out to us than us reaching out, right? So I would advise the same. When you're recruiting, I think you should create tools that attract the right people, then convert them. It's like sales, right?
Yeah.
I mean, rather than cold calling and converting, you build, nurture, and convert. So it's similar, right? So same thing if you do for employees and investors, it's great. That's what I would advise.
Got it. Interesting. And you mentioned about investors, so how should founders approach valuation, and what should they say when they're asked for it?
Oof, it's a very, very complicated question, right? it's something. I mean, yeah, I'm afraid I need to give the consultant answer. It depends, right? So I think it. So the problem with that question is that it depends on a lot of factors. The growth at which you're doing, your appetite for risk, the terms at which you're raising money. I mean, can you do a down round so you can take a risk, but can you do a down round without, legally having a trouble? A, B, without pissing off previous investors. Both are important. If you're legally allowed to do a down round, if your previous investors are pissed off, it doesn't work, right? So what's the story? If you do a down round, can they do that? If you sell an upside, don't oversell it. So that's what I've done with my investors. There is a post-IPO commitment. So there is a very big probability that we'll hit a large IPO. But at the same time, I've told all my investors there is a downside that, this is what you're going to get return, right? And keep them updated and have a realistic understanding, this is not, I mean, fast growing early stage tech startups are not a very financially stable investment. This is very important, right? This will not multiply your money in 3 times in 3 years. So don't put money. I've actually discouraged people from putting money in when I ask people how much savings you have, put it in other stocks. Only invest in companies, money we are willing to lose. This should be very clearly mentioned. So I think the term, all this is important. And then you explain the right valuation, you give the right focus. And I think you should have all the scenarios out to the investor, scenario ABC. What's the best outcome? What's the moderate outcome? What's the worst possible outcome? And what are you doing to prevent the company from going bankrupt? Will you run out of money if I don't raise money in the next round? What's going to happen? So I think it's a combination of all that. And it also depends a lot, Rohit, and that's why I said it depends. It depends a lot to the guy you're talking to, right? Has he done so many investments previously? Does he understand startups in your space? Is he okay? I mean, there are like customers, Rohit. There are top 5. I mean, there are some investors who you should not take money from, right? There is too much trouble. I'm just saying, there's too much trouble. So I think, again, what's the overhead? So you can get some of those red flags with the way you're interacting with them early on. You can easily catch them. You know that if you take money from him, you're going to spend at least 10 times more money managing his expectation in 2 years. And that way, look at it economically, it's feasible, right? It's not feasible. So these are things I would say. And how you do the valuation. There's a lot of factors, and you need to kind of tune in, package it. It's always good to be bullish and optimistic, but a very, very thin line between that and being a fraud, right? So you need to be very, very clear what you're doing. Make sure and educate people the risk that you're taking, and even after you do all this, if you get 80% of your investors happy, you've done a great job.
Nice.
You're not going to get 100% of your investors happy. Be very realistic on this, right? So this is what I would advise with valuation. So you got why I said it's a complex question, right? There's a lot of dimensions to it. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And we earlier discussed, like, you worked in the UK, and for inGen Dynamics, you shuttling between US and India. What advice would you give to listeners who would want to build something in the US? You interestingly on a visa which allows you to work and live there, and the second part to it is, what's the difference between you found in India, UK, and US startup ecosystems?
Okay, I think great points. I think one thing I would advise, like the NVIDIA CEO mentioned, my advice to any wannabe new entrepreneur is don't.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
this is the first idea. Don't start a company because it's way harder than you think.
True.
So much pain and suffering. And if you're really not passionate, it is a sane person won't do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now put that aside. Now coming back to, and if you really want to take a plunge, if you look at these three ecosystems, I think in the UK there are different visa systems, as you know, to do this. In the US, there are different routes you can take. You have the O1 route,
Yeah.
right? And you also have, I mean, not a lot of people know this. Your company can sponsor your H1 as a
Oh,
startup. This
okay.
is possible. This is not
Yeah.
difficult. Okay. This is
Nice.
easy to do. And now with the recent changes, your startup, even with less financial, earlier they had some financial metrics that you need to hit, which is not big, but which may be difficult for us. Now they've relaxed that also, right? And
Nice.
again, because I'm talking about the US, none of my advice should be taken as visa advice. I'm just putting a disclaimer, right?
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are just general thing I'm putting in,
True.
right? So you need to talk to your attorney. But again, I'm just putting out pointers there. So there's an O1, there is an H1 that you can do on your own. And then you have the E1, E1A, and the E1B, right? Which usually is taken after an O1. So you
Oh, I
can
see.
take a 3-year O1,
Okay.
convert to an E1, or you can take your own H1, right?
Right.
And then do that. And there are different options. And so I went to the US in 2002 on
Mm.
an H1, right? So, and I think, and I don't want to disclose my exact visa status because of various
Yeah.
reasons, but I think I had the fortune. I got an SSN earlier on, and there are visa options. And even if you don't do this, another thing people don't realize is that you don't need to also be a resident of the US to set up a company. You
Mm.
don't need to do that. Okay, you can set it up, but it helps to have an SSN and driver's license, obviously, right? It
Okay.
helps.
Yeah.
But there are different routes, and I think there are there are different lawyers who helps you with it. They're very specialized,
Mm.
and they'll and I know a couple of them. They're very good at it, right? And they're
Nice.
very specialized, so they actually make sure that your immigration things are sorted as an entrepreneur.
Nice.
They know your exact problems, what, and they're very good at it. So I know a couple of them in the Bay Area, and who kind of can help you out. So I think it's not hard, but what you need to understand is that you're already dealing with 2,000 ambiguities on a startup.
Yeah.
You want to kind of play dice with this as well, right?
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is a stress, lot of, I mean, being an immigrant entrepreneur is triple hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about the culture and fundraise and the visa and all that, so I think it's triple hard. So I think the UK has slightly, I would say, easier
True.
routes,
Yeah.
and so this is what I would advise. But I'm certain there are ways of doing it and have your visa process run in the background in parallel, and you continue building the startups without having a big impact, because not a lot of VCs are going to ask about your residence earlier on. So you have
Mm.
time to do that. So you can do both in parallel, like
Right.
any startup founder would do. And that's what I would advise, and don't, set the small stuff. So I think things will fall into place. And,
Right. Right.
if not, you will figure out you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so,
No. Totally.
so.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Again, this is not a business book. My favorite business book I would advise is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's a very old book. If you
Yeah.
know, it's a very old book, and again, I think a lot of the Stoic concepts are very important in startups and business. So that's why that's the theme, right? And that's very everything you should take away. I think in business or startups, don't get too excited by your victories. Don't get too depressed by defeat. Very classic example. So that's my favorite business book.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I read it. It's one of my favorite books. We'll put that in the show notes. And, if you could go back in time when you started inGen Dynamics, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done things differently?
I would have told, see what I think one is that I would have hired more for attitude than skill. I mean, that's a mistake I made a lot, and it costed me, in time, money, and stress. So that's one thing I would make a lot of difference, and I would have done very differently.
Correct. Interesting. And what's your favorite online tools? Example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom.
I would say I think it's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Is what I would say, and I think if you learn prompt engineering very well, it's like having your own custom COO, CFO, and I think you need to learn prompt engineering very well. And again, I would advise a lot of people listening in to really understand ChatGPT deeply, not just one two line. But once you do that, this thing is so powerful.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what I would advise everybody to jump on straight away.
Yeah. Interesting. Maybe there's another job title for prompt engineering for each department. I don't know.
Absolutely, and that could be specialized for each role, right?
Yeah.
And this is what I think we're looking at. Absolutely.
Interesting. And Arshad, what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about inGen Dynamics?
You can always have a look at our website. There are a couple of emails written on our website. It's www.ingendynamics.com is our website.
Yeah.
You can find us on LinkedIn. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah.
And you can also, if you want to connect with me, I'm fairly responsive. I do manage to respond to most of the emails and messages. So happy to respond. Even if you mail me personally, I try to respond to everybody's mailing. So, and one thing I do is that I try to meet 10 new people every week. This is one of my metric. So definitely, I'm happy to reach out, help a fellow entrepreneur or help a fellow professional on the journey. Happy to do that. So that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll put that in show notes. And Arshad, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Pleasure speaking to somebody from my own B school. And I wish you all the luck for inGen Dynamics.
Sure. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you for having me on the show. It is fantastic. A great conversation. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cheers.